The conference room smelled like old money and expensive perfume. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Seattle skyline, gray clouds pressing against the glass like they were trying to listen in. I sat at the head of the table, my hands folded over a blue leather portfolio that contained 15 years of carefully documented truth. My mother, Sandra, sat across from me. She was wearing a black Chanel knockoff and pearls that were definitely real, probably bought with money she'd guilt-tripped from some other relative. Her lawyer, a sweaty man named Victor Crane, kept adjusting his tie like it was choking him. Maybe it was, lies have a way of tightening around your throat. "This is absurd," Sandra announced to the room, her voice cutting through the quiet murmur of the estate attorney's preliminary statements. "We are family. We have rights. Harold was my brother-in-law for 35 years. Margaret Chen, Harold's attorney and the woman who'd become something of a mentor to me over the past decade, didn't even look up from her documents. She'd seen this performance before. We both had." "Mrs. Matthews," Margaret said, her voice professionally neutral, "I'll ask you to hold your comments until after the reading is complete. I will not be silenced in a matter that concerns my family's." "Mom." The word came out of my mouth cold and flat. It was the first thing I'd said since entering the room. Sandra's head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. I hadn't called her that in 15 years. The word felt foreign on my tongue, like speaking a language I'd deliberately forgotten. "Don't you mom me, Diana. You isolated Harold from his real family. You manipulated a sick old man." Margaret's hand came down on the table, not hard, but with enough authority to cut Sandra off mid-sentence. "Mrs. Matthews, I will have security remove you if you cannot conduct yourself appropriately. This is a legal proceeding." Victor leaned over and whispered something to Sandra. She sat back, arms crossed, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. I knew that look. I'd seen it the night she put my clothes in garbage bags and left them on the porch. "Let's continue," Margaret said. She opened the leather-bound testament, and I watched my mother's eyes follow the movement like a hawk tracking a mouse. "We're now at Section 7, regarding the distribution of assets from the Harold Chen estate, valued at approximately $12.3 million. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. Victor pulled out a legal pad, pen poised. This was the moment they'd been waiting for, the reason they'd shown up after a decade and a half of silence. The reading of the will had attracted 5 of Harold's distant relatives, 2 former business partners, and my parents, none of whom had visited Harold once during his final illness. Margaret's voice remained steady as she read. "I, Harold Chen, being of sound mind and body, do hereby leave 100% of my estate, including all properties, investments, business holdings, and personal effects, to my daughter, Diana Chen." The silence that followed was spectacular. It lasted maybe 3 seconds before Sandra exploded. "Daughter! Daughter!" She was on her feet, hands slamming on the table. "That is a lie. Harold never had children. This will has been tampered with. I'll sue this entire firm into the ground." Victor was pulling at her arm, trying to get her to sit down, but Sandra was beyond reason now. Her face had gone red, a vein pulsing in her temple. This was the woman who'd taught me that love was conditional, that family was a transaction, that I was only worth keeping around if I was convenient. Margaret reached into her briefcase and pulled out a document. Even from where I sat, I could see the official seals, the notary stamps, the signatures in blue ink. "Mrs. Matthews," Margaret said, and her voice now carried an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "On August 15th, 2010, you and your husband, Richard Matthews, signed a voluntary termination of parental rights regarding your daughter, Diana Matthews, at age 13. Harold Chen legally adopted Diana on September 1st, 2010. She has been his daughter, legally and in every way that matters, for 15 years. She slid the document across the table. Sandra's hand trembled as she picked it up. I watched the color drain from her face as she recognized her own signature at the bottom of the page. "You signed away your rights to contest this will 15 years ago," Margaret continued. "You have no legal standing as family. You are, in the eyes of the law and this estate, a stranger." Victor had gone pale. He was staring at the document like it was a live grenade. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He'd taken this case thinking it would be easy money, a simple intimidation tactic against a grieving young woman. He hadn't done his homework. My mother's eyes met mine across the table. For just a moment, I saw something flicker there. Recognition, maybe. Or the dawning realization that the scared 13-year-old girl she'd thrown away had grown into someone she couldn't bully, couldn't manipulate, couldn't break. "You can't do this," Sandra whispered. But there was no strength behind it. She knew, she'd always known, somewhere deep down, that this day might come. I opened my blue portfolio and pulled out my own copy of the adoption papers. 15 years old, but preserved perfectly. Just like my memory of the night Harold drove 4 hours through a thunderstorm to pick me up from a porch where I'd been sitting on garbage bags filled with my entire life. "Actually," I said quietly, "we already did." To understand how we got to that conference room, you have to go back 15 years. You have to understand what I was before Harold saved me, and what my parents were willing to sacrifice for the daughter they actually wanted. I was 13 years old, and I was the spare child. That's not something people talk about openly, but it's a real thing. Some families have a golden child, the one who can do no wrong, the one who gets all the attention, all the resources, all the love. And then there's the other one, the backup plan, the child who exists to make the golden child look better by comparison. My sister Tiffany was 3 years older than me, and she was perfect. Objectively, measurably perfect. She had our mother's blonde hair and blue eyes, while I got our father's dark hair and what Sandra called muddy brown eyes. Tiffany was outgoing and charming, always ready with a smile and a compliment for whatever adult happened to be in the room. I was quiet, bookish, the kind of kid who'd rather spend Saturday in the library than at a mall. Tiffany wanted to be an actress. She'd wanted it since she was 6 years old, and our parents had built their entire lives around making that dream come true. Dance classes, acting workshops, voice lessons, headshots, an agent by the time she was 12. Every spare dollar went into Tiffany's future. Every conversation at the dinner table revolved around her latest audition, her newest monologue, her growing resume. I didn't mind, not really. I learned early that wanting things for myself was pointless. We couldn't afford my violin lessons because Tiffany needed new headshots. I couldn't go on the school trip to Washington, D.C. because Tiffany had a call back in Los Angeles. My birthday parties were always small, quiet affairs, while Tiffany's were events with hired performers and professional photographers. I told myself it was fine. I told myself that I didn't need those things, that I was self-sufficient, that I could make my own way. I got good grades because no one was paying attention anyway. I read books because books didn't care if you were the spared child. I learned to be invisible, to not cause problems, to not ask for anything. But even invisible children need things sometimes. And that's where the story really begins. It was April of 2010. I was in 8th grade, 3 months away from graduating middle school. My math teacher, Mrs. Patterson, called me into her office after class one day. She was a small woman with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, and she'd always been kind to me in a distant, professional way. "Diana," she said, gesturing for me to sit down, "I wanted to talk to you about high school." I sat, my backpack clutched in my lap like a shield. Did I do something wrong? No, nothing like that. She smiled, and it reached her eyes. Actually, quite the opposite. Your test scores are exceptional, Diana. Your math aptitude is in the 99th percentile nationally. Your teachers have been discussing your academic trajectory, and we all agree that you have significant potential. I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever talked about my potential before. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward. "There's a private academy, Lakewood Prep, about 30 minutes from here. They have an extremely rigorous STEM program, one of the best in the state. Students who graduate from Lakewood have a 97% college acceptance rate, and many go on to top-tier universities." "Oh," I said quietly. "That sounds nice. Diana, I'm not just telling you about it. I'm telling you that I've already submitted your application with your principal's support, and you've been accepted with a full academic scholarship." The world seemed to tilt slightly. A scholarship? Full tuition, 4 years. You'd still need to cover books, uniforms, and activity fees, probably around $2,000 a year, but the tuition itself, which is $28,000 annually, would be completely covered. This is an incredible opportunity. $2,000 a year. That was less than Tiffany's headshots cost. That was less than a single acting workshop at the studio in Seattle where she studied every summer. It was nothing compared to what my parents spent on her. For the first time in my life, I let myself want something. "I'd like to go," I said. My voice was small, but it was there. Mrs. Patterson smiled. "I hoped you'd say that. The scholarship is contingent on maintaining a 3.5 GPA. But given your current performance, I don't see that being an issue. You'll need to have your parents sign the acceptance paperwork by May 15th. I took the folder home that day with shaking hands. The scholarship letter was printed on heavy cream-colored paper with a gold seal at the top. It spelled out everything: full tuition for 4 years, renewable annually based on academic performance. All they needed was $2,000 a year for incidentals and a commitment to excellence. I was going to show it to my parents at dinner. I had practiced what I would say, how I would explain what an opportunity this was, how little it would cost them compared to what they spent on Tiffany. I had convinced myself that surely, this one time, they would see me. They would be proud. They would choose me. But when I got home, Tiffany was in the kitchen crying. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black streaks, and our mother was holding her, stroking her hair, making soothing noises. "What happened?" I asked from the doorway. My mother looked up, her face tight with stress. "Not now, Diana." "It's the summer intensive," Tiffany sobbed. "At the actor studio in New York. Mom, I have to go. Bethany got in last year and now she has an agent in Manhattan. This could change everything." My father came in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. Richard Matthews was a quiet man, an accountant who'd never quite made partner at his firm. He did what Sandra told him to do, believed what she told him to believe, and funded what she told him to fund. "How much?" he asked, and I heard the weariness in his voice. $8,000 for the 6-week program," Sandra said. "But Richard, this is important. You heard what she said. This could be her big break." Bethany's mother said, "We don't have $8,000 just lying around, Sandra." "Then we'll find it. We'll put it on the credit card. We'll take out a loan. We'll figure it out." My mother's voice had gone sharp. This was the tone she used when she wasn't going to take no for an answer. I stood there in the doorway, the Lakewood prep folder clutched against my chest, and something inside me broke. Not in a loud, dramatic way, just a quiet crack, like ice starting to give way under pressure. "I got a scholarship," I said. No one heard me. "I got a scholarship," I said again, louder this time. My mother glanced over, irritated at the interruption. "That's nice, Diana. Can we talk about this later?" "It's a full scholarship to Lakewood Prep, for high school, all 4 years. My father's head came up. "Lakewood? That's a private school." "Full academic scholarship. I just need $2,000 a year for books and fees." There was a beat of silence. I saw something flicker across my father's face. Interest, maybe, or relief. $2,000 a year was manageable. It was reasonable. It was nothing compared to what they spent on Tiffany. But then Sandra spoke, and her voice was cold. "Absolutely not." I stared at her. "What?" "You heard me? Absolutely not. We don't have $2,000 a year to throw away on some fancy school when you can go to the public high school for free." "But it's a full scholarship. It's one of the best schools in the state." Mrs. Patterson said, "I don't care what Mrs. Patterson said. The answer is no." Tiffany had stopped crying. She was watching us now, her eyes wide. My father shifted uncomfortably. "Sandra," he said carefully, "maybe we should think about this. It's a good opportunity for Diana, and $2,000 isn't that much." $2,000 that we need for Tiffany's summer program," Sandra snapped. "We're not going to sabotage Tiffany's future because Diana wants to go to some snobby prep school." Something hot and desperate rose up in my chest. This isn't about sabotaging anyone. This is about me. For once, this is about me. I never ask for anything. I never cause problems. All I want is this one thing. "Don't be dramatic," my mother said. She'd turned back to Tiffany, dismissing me. The public school is fine. You'll be fine. No, I said. The word hung in the air. My mother's back stiffened. What did you just say to me? I said no. I'm not fine. I want to go to Lakewood. I earned that scholarship. Mrs. Patterson said I have potential. She said I could go to a top-tier university. She said, Sandra mimicked cruelly. You know what I say? I say you're being selfish. Your sister has a real talent, a real future. You're just good at taking tests. That's not the same thing. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. It's $2,000. That's less than her headshots cost. It's less than one acting workshop. It's enough. My mother's hand slammed down on the counter. I'm done discussing this. You're going to Roosevelt High like a normal kid, and you're going to stop acting like you're better than everyone else just because you got some scholarship. Now take your things upstairs and start on your homework. I looked at my father. He was staring at the floor, his hands shoved in his pockets. He wasn't going to help me. He never helped me. Please, I whispered. Dad, please. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was worse than my mother's anger. It was pity and resignation. Your mother's right, he said quietly. The public school is fine. You'll be fine. I stood there for one more moment, hoping that someone would change their mind, that someone would choose me, just this once. But Tiffany had started crying again, talking about how her friend Bethany was going to leave her behind, how she'd never make it if she didn't go to New York, and my parents' attention swung back to her like it always did. I walked upstairs to my room. I put the Lakewood prep folder in my desk drawer, and I started making a plan. For 3 weeks, I tried everything I could think of. I wrote out a budget showing exactly how little $2,000 was in comparison to Tiffany's expenses. I asked Mrs. Patterson if there was any way to get the fees waived. I even considered getting a job, though I knew I was too young and that my parents would never allow it anyway. But the deadline was approaching, and nothing was changing. My parents had made their decision. Tiffany was going to New York, and I was going to Roosevelt High. Then, 2 days before the acceptance paperwork was due, I did something I'd never done before. I called my Uncle Harold. Harold Chen wasn't really my uncle. He was my father's college roommate, the best man at my parents' wedding, and technically my godfather, though that designation had never meant much in our family. We weren't religious, and Harold lived 4 hours away in Seattle, so I'd only seen him maybe a dozen times in my life. Birthday cards arrived with $20 bills inside. Christmas presents came in the mail, always books, always perfectly chosen for my reading level and interests, in a way that suggested he actually paid attention. I'd kept every single one of those books. I found his number in my mother's address book. My hands were shaking as I dialed. It rang 4 times, and I was about to hang up when I heard his voice. Hello? Uncle Harold? My voice came out smaller than I'd intended. It's Diana Matthews. There was a pause. Diana? Is everything all right? Are your parents okay? Everyone's fine. I needed to talk to someone. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, I'm listening. And then it all came spilling out. The scholarship, Lakewood Prep, my parents, refusal, Tiffany's summer program. The $2,000 that was nothing compared to what they spent on my sister, but somehow too much to spend on me. I tried to keep my voice steady, tried not to sound like I was begging, but by the end I was crying, the words tumbling over each other in a desperate rush. When I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. It stretched so long I thought maybe he'd hung up. Uncle Harold? I'm here. His voice was different now, harder. Diana, I need you to answer something honestly. Do you really want to go to this school? Or are you just trying to get your parents' attention? The question caught me off guard. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I want to go. I want to learn. I want to be somewhere where people think I'm worth investing in. Okay. I heard him take a deep breath. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to send you the $2,000 for your first year. You're going to accept that scholarship. You're not going to tell your parents where the money came from until after the paperwork is signed. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. But Diana, I need you to understand something. If I do this, if I help you, your parents are going to be angry. Very angry. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the look on my mother's face when she'd dismissed me. The pity in my father's eyes. The way they'd turned back to Tiffany like I didn't exist. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. Good. Give me the details. I'll wire the money tomorrow. He did exactly what he promised. The money arrived in my savings account the next morning. I took the acceptance paperwork to school, got it notarized by the principal's secretary, and mailed it to Lakewood Prep that afternoon. It was done. I was going. I didn't tell my parents until the acceptance deadline had passed and it was too late to change anything. I chose dinner, because somehow I thought having Tiffany there might keep things from getting too bad. I was wrong. I need to tell you something, I said, setting down my fork. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I accepted the scholarship to Lakewood Prep. I start in September. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Excuse me? I got the money for the fees. The paperwork is already submitted. I'm going... What money? Diana, what did you do? Uncle Harold gave it to me. He sent me the $2,000. The silence that followed was arctic. My father's face had gone white. Tiffany was staring at her plate, suddenly very interested in her mashed potatoes. You went behind our backs, my mother said slowly. Each word was precise, clipped. You disobeyed a direct order and went behind our backs. You wouldn't listen. You didn't even consider it. You just said no without even thinking. Because we're your parents and we know what's best for you. Sandra's voice was rising now. How dare you manipulate Harold like that? How dare you make us look like bad parents to him? I didn't manipulate anyone. I told him the truth. I told him about the scholarship and that I needed help, and he wanted to help me. My father finally spoke. Diana, you've put us in a very difficult position. We're going to have to call Harold and explain that this was a misunderstanding, that you weren't authorized to accept his money. It's too late. The paperwork is already in. I'm enrolled. Then we'll unenroll you, my mother snapped. We'll call the school tomorrow and withdraw your acceptance. Something cold settled in my chest. I'd known this might happen, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. If you do that, I said quietly, I'll tell Harold exactly what you did. I'll tell him that you had the money for my education, but you chose to spend it on Tiffany instead. I'll tell him everything. My mother stood up so fast her chair fell backward. You ungrateful little bitch. Sandra! My father looked shocked, but he didn't move to stop her. No, Richard, no, I am done with this. She was pointing at me now, her finger shaking. We have given her everything. A roof over her head, food, clothes, everything she needs. And this is how she repays us. By going behind our backs and making us look like monsters. You didn't give me everything, I said. My voice was shaking, but I kept going. You gave Tiffany everything. You gave me the leftovers. You gave me whatever was convenient. And the one time I asked for something for myself, you said no without even thinking about it. Because Tiffany has talent. Tiffany has a future. You're just... She stopped herself, but I saw it in her eyes. What she was about to say. What she'd probably always thought. I'm just what? I asked. Say it. You're just ordinary, she said finally. You're smart, fine, but so are a million other kids. Tiffany is special. Tiffany is going to be somebody. We're investing in her future because it's actually going to pay off. The words landed like physical blows. I felt Tiffany flinch next to me, but she didn't say anything. She never said anything. Diana, my father said, and his voice was pleading now. Just apologize to your mother. Tell Harold you made a mistake. We can work this out. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized that he wasn't weak. He wasn't being manipulated by my mother. He believed this. He genuinely believed that Tiffany was worth more than me, that her dreams mattered more than mine, that I should apologize for wanting something for myself. No, I said. What did you say? I said no, I'm not apologizing. I'm going to Lakewood. Uncle Harold's money is already in the school's account. The paperwork is done. There's nothing you can do about it. My mother's face was red now, a vein pulsing in her temple. If you walk out that door to go to that school, Diana, you are choosing Harold over us. You are choosing to destroy this family. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just going to school. You are destroying this family. She was screaming now. You are tearing us apart with your selfishness. You are making us choose between you and your sister, between supporting your sister's real future and wasting money on your little rebellion. Then choose Tiffany, I said. The words came out calm, almost detached. You were always going to choose her anyway. My mother stared at me. Then she turned to my father. Richard, tell her. Tell her that if she does this, there will be consequences. My father looked at me. His eyes were sad, but his voice was firm. Diana, if you insist on going to that school against our wishes, you're going to have to figure out everything else on your own. We won't pay for anything beyond basic food and shelter. No allowance, no clothes money, no car, nothing. That's fine, I said. I'm not finished, he said. And if you continue to defy us, if you continue to put Harold ahead of your own family, then maybe you should live with Harold instead. The room went silent. Even my mother looked surprised. Richard, she said slowly, what are you saying? I'm saying that maybe Diana would be happier living with someone who shares her values, someone who thinks she's so special that she deserves to be spoiled and coddled. He was giving me an out. He was giving me a way to leave. And he was doing it in a way that made it my fault, my choice, so that he and my mother could tell everyone that I was the one who abandoned them. Okay, I said. Okay, what? Okay, I'll call Uncle Harold and ask if I can stay with him. My mother laughed. It was a brittle, ugly sound. You think he's actually going to say yes? You think he wants a 13-year-old girl living with him? He gave you money because it was easy, Diana. It made him feel good. But taking you in, that's different. That's a real commitment. And when he says no, when he tells you he can't do it, you're going to come crawling back here and apologize. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he'll say yes. I guess we'll find out. I left the table and went upstairs to my room. My hands were still shaking as I dialed Harold's number. He picked up on the second ring. Diana, is something wrong? Uncle Harold? I said, and my voice finally broke. I need help. My parents, they're saying that if I go to Lakewood, I need to live somewhere else. They're kicking me out. And I know it's a lot to ask. And I'll understand if you say no, but I don't have anywhere else to go. Silence. I counted the seconds. 5, 10, 15. Pack your things, Harold said finally. His voice was steel. Pack everything you care about. I'm leaving Seattle right now. I'll be there in 4 hours. Can you hold on for 4 hours? Yes, I whispered. Good. Diana, listen to me. This is not your fault. Do you understand? This is not your fault. Okay. I'm going to talk to your parents when I get there, and then you're coming home with me. Is that all right? Yes. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, he said, but his voice was gentler now. Just pack your things and wait. I'm coming. He hung up. I sat on my bed for a long moment, staring at my phone. Then I got up and started packing. I didn't have much. My clothes fit into 2 duffel bags. My books took 3 boxes, my laptop, my notebook, my violin that I hadn't played in 2 years because there was no money for lessons. The stuffed rabbit I'd had since I was 4 that I was too old for but couldn't bear to leave behind. I was almost done when I heard shouting downstairs. Harold had arrived. I opened my door slightly and heard his voice, loud and clear and angrier than I'd ever heard him. You did what? We gave her an ultimatum, my father said. She chose you over us, Harold. She made her choice. She's 13 years old. She's a child. You don't give children ultimatums about where they live. She defied us, my mother said coldly. She went behind our backs. She manipulated you into... She asked for help. Harold's voice cracked like a whip. She's a child who needed help, and she asked for it because her own parents couldn't be bothered to support her. $2,000, Sandra. That's what you were fighting over. $2,000 a year for a full scholarship to one of the best schools in the state. And you said no because you'd rather spend that money on Tiffany. Tiffany has a gift. And Diana doesn't. Diana, who earned that scholarship on her own merit. Diana, who has never asked you for anything until now. This isn't about the scholarship, my father said. This is about respect. This is about Diana understanding that we are her parents and she doesn't get to make these decisions without us. Then be her parents, Harold shouted. Be the parents who support her dreams instead of crushing them. Be the parents who see her as more than just a supporting character in Tiffany's life story. There was a long silence. Where is she? Harold asked finally. In her room, my mother said. Her voice was flat. Packing, since she's so eager to leave. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Harold appeared in my doorway. He was a tall man, Asian features, salt and pepper hair, dressed in jeans and a Seattle Mariners sweatshirt like he'd left home in a hurry, which he had. For me. He looked at my packed bags, at my tear-stained face, and something in his expression softened. Hey, kiddo, he said gently. You ready to go? I nodded. Okay, let's get your stuff in the car. He picked up 2 of the boxes. I grabbed my duffel bags. We made 3 trips down the stairs, passing my parents in the living room each time. My mother sat on the couch, arms crossed, staring at the wall. My father stood by the window, his back to us. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen. On the last trip, Harold stopped in the doorway. I'm going to say this once, he said, his voice cold and formal. Diana will be living with me from now on. I'll be enrolling her in Lakewood Prep as planned. If you want to maintain a relationship with your daughter, you're welcome to call, to visit, to be part of her life. But I will not tolerate any more of this manipulation, this emotional abuse, this treating her like she's somehow less important than her sister. She'll be back, my mother said. When you get tired of playing father, when you realize what a burden a teenage girl is, she'll be back. And we won't forget this, Harold. We won't forget how you turned our daughter against us. Harold looked at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Sandra, I didn't turn Diana against you. You did that all by yourself. We walked out to his car. It was raining, a light drizzle that made everything gray and blurred. Harold loaded my things into the trunk while I stood on the driveway, looking back at the house I'd lived in my whole life. The front door was still open. I could see my mother sitting on the couch, my father standing by the window. Neither of them came out. Neither of them said goodbye. Diana, Harold said gently, we should go. I nodded and got into the car. We were halfway down the block when I looked back one more time. The house was dark now. They'd turned off the lights. It looked like nobody lived there at all. Are you okay? Harold asked. I don't know, I said honestly. That's okay. You don't have to know right now. We drove in silence for a while. The rain got heavier. Harold turned on the wipers and some soft jazz on the radio. Uncle Harold, I said finally. Yeah. Why did you come? Why did you help me? He glanced over at me, then back at the road. You want the honest answer? Yes. Because when you called me about the scholarship, you didn't ask me for money first. You told me about the opportunity. You told me about what it meant to you. You talked about learning, about potential, about wanting to be somewhere where people believed in you. And then, only after all that, you mentioned that you needed help with the fees. He paused, checking his mirrors before changing lanes. Most people, when they want something from you, they lead with the ask. But you led with the dream. That told me everything I needed to know about who you are. And when I realized that your own parents couldn't see that, couldn't see how special you are, I knew I had to do something. I'm not special, I said quietly. Mom was right. I'm just ordinary. Diana, look at me. I turned toward him. You are 13 years old, and you just stood up to your parents, accepted a full academic scholarship, and made the hardest decision of your life because you knew it was the right thing for your future. That is not ordinary. That is extraordinary. They hate me now. Maybe, Or maybe they're angry and hurt and they don't know how to process it. Either way, that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your education, to your future. Do you understand? I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I did. We drove north through the rain. The city lights gave way to suburban darkness, then to the glow of the interstate. Harold turned up the jazz a little. I leaned my head against the window and watched the raindrops race each other down the glass. "Uncle Harold," I said again. Thank you for coming to get me. Thank you for choosing me." His hand found mine and squeezed it gently. "Always, kiddo, always." The first 3 months living with Harold were the strangest of my life. Not bad strange, just different in ways I hadn't expected. For one thing, Harold actually wanted to know about my day. Every evening at dinner, he'd ask what I was learning, what I was working on, what challenged me, and he listened, really listened. He didn't nod absently while checking his phone or interrupt to talk about someone else. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered details from conversations we'd had weeks before. "How did that calculus test go? The one you were worried about? You said you were reading The Great Gatsby for English. What did you think of the ending? Did you decide to join the robotics club?" It took me weeks to trust that he genuinely cared, that this wasn't some performance he'd eventually get tired of maintaining, but he never got tired. Every single day, he showed up for me. Lakewood Prep was exactly what Mrs. Patterson had promised. The classes were hard, brutally hard sometimes, but in a way that made me feel alive. My chemistry teacher was doing research at the University of Washington and brought that energy into the classroom. My literature teacher had us analyzing texts like we were preparing to write dissertations. My math teacher moved so fast through material that I had to study 2 hours every night just to keep up. I loved every minute of it. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who thought learning was interesting, who competed over grades not because they were trying to please their parents, but because they genuinely wanted to understand things. Nobody thought I was weird for spending lunch in the library. Nobody made fun of me for asking questions in class. Harold's house became my sanctuary. It was a small 2-bedroom craftsman in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle, filled with books and art and the smell of whatever he was experimenting with in the kitchen. He wasn't a great cook, but he tried, and we laughed together over burned pasta and oversalted soup, and the one time he confused cayenne pepper with paprika and nearly burned our mouths off. On weekends, we'd go to Pike Place Market and watch the fish throwers, or walk along the waterfront, or explore the used bookstores on Capitol Hill. Harold would buy me any book I wanted, no questions asked, no budget discussed. I tried to be reasonable about it, but he'd shake his head and add 3 more to the stack. "Knowledge is never a waste of money, Diana. Never." My parents didn't call. Not once in those first 3 months. I told myself I didn't care, that I was better off without them. But sometimes late at night, I'd lie awake wondering if they ever thought about me. If they regretted what they'd done. If Tiffany missed me at all. Harold noticed, of course. "You want to talk about it?" he asked one night after he'd found me staring out the window instead of doing homework. "There's nothing to talk about." "Diana," I sighed. "Do you think they're sorry?" "Honestly, I don't know. Your mother is complicated. She's not a bad person, but she's made some bad choices. Your father goes along with whatever she decides because it's easier than fighting. Whether they're sorry or not, that's about them, not you." I keep thinking maybe I should call them. Maybe I should apologize. For what? His voice was sharp. For wanting an education, for accepting help when they refused to give it. "Diana, you have nothing to apologize for. But maybe if I just... No." He set down his coffee mug and looked at me directly. "Listen to me. You are allowed to put yourself first. You are allowed to choose your own future. You are allowed to say no to people who hurt you, even if they're family, especially if they're family. But they're my parents. And they chose to make you homeless rather than support your education. That's on them, not you. If they want a relationship with you, they know where you are. They know how to pick up a phone. The fact that they haven't says everything about their priorities." It hurt to hear, but it was true. And somehow, having Harold say it out loud made it easier to bear. By the end of my first year at Lakewood, I was ranked 5th in my class. By the end of my second year, I was 3rd. Harold came to every parent-teacher conference, every award ceremony, every academic competition. He sat in the audience with a camera and took pictures like I was performing in Carnegie Hall instead of presenting a science fair project on solar energy efficiency. The summer after my sophomore year, Harold sat me down for what he called a serious conversation. I braced myself, wondering if this was when he'd tell me he couldn't do this anymore, that I needed to go back to my parents. Instead, he pulled out a folder full of financial documents. "Diana, I need to talk to you about money." My stomach dropped. "Are we in trouble? Am I costing you too much? I can get a job. I can—" "Stop. We're fine. Better than fine. But you're 16 now, old enough to understand what's happening with your future, and I want you to be informed." He opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, investment accounts, college savings bonds. "When I adopted you, I set up a college fund. I've been putting money into it every month and investing it carefully. Between that fund and your academic performance, you should be able to go to any college you want without worrying about debt." I stared at the numbers. There was over $80,000 in the account. That's too much. "Uncle Harold, I can't—" "You can and you will. Diana, I don't have kids of my own. I wasn't planning to. But then you came into my life, and suddenly I had a daughter. Someone to invest in, someone to build a future for. This money isn't a burden. It's a privilege. But what if something happens to you? What if you need it for— I'm financially secure, Diana. I own my business outright. My house is paid off. My retirement is funded. This money is for you, and only you. Do you understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "There's something else." He pulled out another document. "This is my will. I had it updated last year. You're the sole beneficiary of my estate. If anything happens to me, everything I have goes to you." "Uncle Harold, don't talk like that." "I'm 58 years old, kiddo. I'm healthy, and I plan to be around for a long time, but I need to be responsible. I need to know that you're taken care of, no matter what. And I need you to know that you're not a burden. You're not temporary. You're my daughter, legally, and in every way that matters." I was crying now, unable to stop the tears. Harold pulled me into a hug, and I held on to him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. "I love you," I whispered. It was the first time I'd said it. The first time I'd said it to anyone and meant it completely. "I love you too, Diana, more than you know." That summer, Harold taught me about his business. Chen Imports specialized in high-end Asian furniture and art, working with manufacturers and artisans across Japan, China, and Korea to bring unique pieces to galleries and interior designers in the United States. It was a niche market, but Harold had built a reputation for quality and authenticity. "I started this business 30 years ago with a $5,000 loan and a shipping container full of furniture I bought at an estate sale in Kyoto," he told me. Everyone said I was crazy, but I knew there was a market for this, for pieces that had history and craftsmanship, not just mass-produced garbage from IKEA. He showed me the books, the profit and loss statements, the inventory tracking systems. "If you're interested, I could use help. The business has grown beyond what I can manage alone, and I'm tired of paying other people to do work that family could do better. I don't know anything about importing or furniture but you're smart, you're organized, and you're good with numbers. That's what I need. I'll teach you the rest." So I started working for Harold that summer, 10 hours a week at first, then 20 as I got more comfortable. I learned about customs regulations and shipping logistics and quality control. I learned how to negotiate with suppliers, how to read a bill of lading, how to spot a fake antique from 50 feet away. But mostly, I learned that I was good at this. Really good. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was managing Harold's accounts receivable and helping with inventory forecasting. I found inefficiencies in his shipping routes that saved him $15,000 a year. I negotiated better terms with 3 of his major suppliers. I built a database system that cut his order processing time in half. Harold was thrilled. "You have a gift for this, Diana. A real gift. Have you thought about what you want to study in college? I had, actually. Business administration, maybe finance. I want to understand how all of this works at a bigger scale. Penn has an excellent business school. So does Michigan. And obviously, UW is right here in Seattle if you want to stay close. I want to stay close, I said, and I meant it. After everything Harold had done for me, the idea of leaving him felt wrong, ungrateful. Diana? He set down his coffee. I need you to hear this. I want you to go wherever is best for your education and your future. If that's Harvard or Stanford or anywhere else, you go. Don't limit yourself because of me. But the business will be here. I'll be here. You don't owe me anything except to be the best version of yourself you can be. Do you understand? I got into 7 schools, full rides to 3 of them. I chose University of Washington because they had a joint program with the Foster School of Business that would let me get both my bachelor's and MBA in 5 years instead of 6. And yes, because it meant I could keep working with Harold. College was harder than high school, but in good ways. I took microeconomics and macroeconomics, corporate finance and managerial accounting. I joined the investment club and the entrepreneurship society. I interned at a venture capital firm my junior year and spent my senior year working on a consulting project with Boeing. And through it all, I kept working for Chen Imports. By the time I graduated with my MBA at 23, I was effectively running half the business. Harold handled the supplier relationships and the creative side, choosing pieces, building relationships with artisans, curating collections. I handled everything else. Operations, finance, logistics, customer service. The business grew. In 5 years, we tripled our revenue. We expanded into furniture restoration and custom design work. We opened a showroom in downtown Seattle that became a destination for interior designers from across the Pacific Northwest. Harold started talking about retirement. I'm 65, Diana. I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm tired. You're not tired. You're bored. There's a difference. He laughed. Maybe, but I'm serious about stepping back. This business needs someone with vision, someone who understands where the market is going. That's you, not me. So make me COO, Chief Operating Officer. You stay on as CEO, handle the big picture stuff, and I run the day-to-day. What if I made you CEO and I became chairman? I stared at him. Uncle Harold, I'm 25 years old. And you're better at this than I ever was. Diana, I built this business on relationships and intuition. You've taken those foundations and added strategy, efficiency, systems. You've turned my little import company into a legitimate enterprise. Why shouldn't you run it? Because people won't take me seriously. I'm too young. You're brilliant, you're capable, and you're my daughter. This business is yours as much as mine, maybe more. You've earned this. So at 25, I became CEO of Chen Imports. Harold stayed on as chairman, still involved in major decisions but letting me drive the vision. And drive it I did. I modernized our online presence, building an e-commerce platform that let designers browse our inventory and place orders directly. I expanded our supplier network into Vietnam and Thailand. I hired a marketing manager and a full-time photographer to create lookbooks that showcased our pieces in styled environments. Revenue doubled again in 3 years. We opened a second showroom in Portland. Interior design magazines started featuring our pieces. We started getting celebrity clients, tech executives furnishing their new mansions, luxury hotels looking for statement pieces. Harold was so proud he could barely contain himself. Diana, he said one night over dinner, you know I never expected any of this. When I took you in 15 years ago, I was just trying to help a kid who needed help. I never imagined you'd become this incredible person, that you'd take my little business and turn it into something I barely recognize. It's still your business, Uncle Harold. No. He shook his head. It's yours. It's been yours for years. I'm just the old man who gets to watch you succeed. You're not old. I'm 68, kiddo. That's old. And I'm tired. Good tired, but tired. I've been thinking it's time to make it official. Make what official? Transfer ownership. Make you the sole owner of Chen Imports. It's already in my will, but why wait? Why not do it now, while I'm alive to see you run it? Uncle Harold, I've talked to my lawyer. We can structure it as a gift transfer, minimize the tax implications. The business is valued at about $8 million now, mostly in inventory and real estate. It's yours, Diana. It should be yours legally, officially, immediately. I couldn't speak. $8 million. The business that Harold had built from nothing, that he'd poured his life into, that represented everything he'd worked for. He wanted to give it to me. I don't deserve this, I whispered. You deserve everything, he said firmly. You deserve success, security, a future where you never have to depend on anyone who doesn't value you. This business is my legacy, Diana, but you're my legacy too. And I want to see you take it further than I ever could. We did the transfer in the spring of 2024. I became sole owner of Chen Imports at 28 years old, with Harold staying on as paid consultant and advisor. He'd still come into the showroom a few days a week, still maintained relationships with his favorite suppliers, but the weight of running everything had shifted to me, and I thrived under that weight. But then, in November of 2024, Harold got sick. It started small. He was tired more often. He lost weight. He'd forget things occasionally, small details that weren't like him. He blamed it on age, on working too hard for too long, on simply being ready to slow down. By January of 2025, it was clear something was seriously wrong. The diagnosis was pancreatic cancer, stage 4, inoperable. The oncologist gave him 6 months, maybe a year if the chemotherapy worked and he was lucky. Harold wasn't lucky. He fought hard. He did every treatment they recommended, endured every side effect with stoic determination. I moved back into his house so I could take care of him, hiring nurses for when I had to be at the showroom. The business kept running because that's what Harold wanted, because he said watching me work gave him something to live for. You're going to be fine without me, he said one afternoon in April. He was in his bed, thinner than I'd ever seen him, but his eyes were still sharp. You're already fine without me. You don't need me anymore. Don't say that. Of course I need you. You need me emotionally, sure. But professionally? Diana, you've been running circles around me for years. You're going to take this business places I never dreamed of. I don't want to do it without you. You won't be without me. I'll always be with you. Every decision you make, every success you celebrate, I'll be there. You carry me with you, kiddo. You always will. He died on May 3rd, 2025, peacefully, in his sleep, with me holding his hand. I didn't cry at first. I couldn't. I was too busy planning the funeral, notifying suppliers and clients, making sure the business didn't fall apart during the transition. I functioned on autopilot, checking tasks off a list, being efficient and professional and completely numb. The funeral was small. Harold had outlived most of his close friends, and he'd been intensely private about his illness, not wanting people to see him weak. So it was me, a few business associates, some neighbors, and Margaret Chen, the lawyer who'd handled Harold's adoption of me 15 years earlier and had become one of his closest friends, and my parents. I saw them in the back row as I stood to give the eulogy. Sandra in a black dress that was too young for her, my father in an ill-fitting suit, both of them wearing expressions of solemn concern that didn't reach their eyes. They hadn't called when Harold got sick. They hadn't visited. They hadn't sent a card or flowers or any acknowledgement that they knew he was dying. But they'd come to the funeral. I got through the eulogy somehow, talking about Harold's kindness, his vision, his unwavering support, talking about how he'd saved me, how he'd believed in me when no one else would, how he'd built something beautiful and then trusted me to carry it forward. When I sat back down, Margaret squeezed my hand. He was so proud of you, she whispered. Every time I talked to him, all he wanted to discuss was what you were doing, how you were growing the business, how brilliant you were. I'm going to miss him so much. I know. But Diana, he left everything in perfect order. Everything. He wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of, that there would be no questions, no complications. After the service, as people were filing out, my mother approached me. Diana, she said, and her voice was softer than I remembered. I'm so sorry for your loss. Harold was a good man. I looked at her. 15 years. 15 years since she'd put my clothes in garbage bags and told me I was destroying the family. 15 years of silence, of no calls on my birthday, no cards at Christmas, no acknowledgement that I existed unless she wanted something. "Thank you for coming," I said formally, politely, the way you'd thank a stranger. "Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about—" "Not today." My voice was steel. "Today is about Harold. Whatever you want to talk about can wait." She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Of course. Maybe we could have coffee later this week. There are some things we should discuss. Family things?" "Family things," I almost laughed. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I wouldn't. She gave me a phone number I didn't write down and left with my father trailing behind her. I watched them go, feeling nothing. No anger, no grief, no longing. Just a vast, empty indifference. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Margaret had told me it was standard procedure, that even though I was the sole beneficiary, certain formalities had to be observed. I'd assumed it would be just me and Margaret in her office, a quick review of documents, signatures, and done. I was wrong. When I arrived at Margaret's office on the 25th floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise, the conference room was full. My parents were there with a lawyer I didn't recognize. A few of Harold's distant cousins who I'd met maybe twice in my life. 2 representatives from charities Harold had supported. And Tiffany. My sister looked different. Older, obviously. She was 31 now. But also diminished somehow. Her blonde hair was darker, probably dyed, and pulled back in a severe ponytail. She wore a sensible pantsuit instead of the trendy clothes she used to favor. And she looked tired, bone-deep tired, in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Our eyes met across the room. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it and looked away. "Thank you all for coming," Margaret said, settling into her seat at the head of the table. "I know this has been a difficult time. Harold was a beloved member of our community, and his loss is felt deeply by everyone who knew him." My mother made a small noise of agreement, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue even though they were completely dry. As Harold's attorney and the executor of his estate, it's my responsibility to ensure his wishes are carried out exactly as he specified. The estate has been appraised and valued at $12.3 million, including business assets, real estate, investments, and personal property. I saw my mother's back straighten. $12.3 million. That was $3 million more than when Harold had transferred the business to me the year before. The cancer treatments had been expensive, but the business had continued to grow even while he was sick. Even in death, Harold was still building his legacy. "Now," Margaret continued, opening the leather-bound testament, "let's proceed with the reading. I'll start with the charitable bequests and specific gifts, then move on to the primary distribution of assets." She read through Harold's donations to various charities, $50,000 here, $100,000 there. She read through specific bequests to friends, his vintage watch collection to his college roommate, his art collection to the Seattle Asian Art Museum, his personal library to the University of Washington. And then she got to Section 7. That's when everything exploded. Margaret's voice was steady as she read Section 7, but I could see the slight tension in her shoulders. She knew what was coming. We'd reviewed this document together a dozen times in the weeks before Harold's death, making sure every word was precise, every clause airtight. Section 7, Distribution of Primary Assets. Margaret read, "Or I, Darren, Harold Chen, being of sound mind and body, do hereby leave 100% of my estate, including all properties, investments, business holdings, and personal effects, to my daughter, Diana Chen, whom I legally adopted on September 1st, 2010. The reaction was immediate and explosive. "What?" My mother's voice cut through the room like a knife. She was half out of her chair, her face flushed red. "Daughter? Harold didn't have a daughter." "Mrs. Matthews, please," Margaret began. "This is fraud. This will has been tampered with. Harold would never—" "Mrs. Matthews," Margaret's voice snapped with authority. "I will ask you one time to control yourself, or I will have security escort you from this building. This is a legal proceeding, and you will conduct yourself accordingly." Victor Crane, my parents' lawyer, was pulling frantically at Sandra's sleeve, trying to get her to sit down. He was sweating more now, his tie askew, looking like a man who was beginning to realize he'd made a terrible mistake taking this case. "Sandra, sit down," my father hissed. For once, his voice carried actual command. She sat, but her hands were clenched into fists on the table, her jaw tight with fury. Margaret waited until the room settled before continuing. Harold Chen legally adopted Diana Matthews, now Diana Chen, on September 1, 2010, following a voluntary termination of parental rights signed by Richard and Sandra Matthews on August 15, 2010. She slid a document across the table. It was the same one she'd shown at the beginning of our story, but now there were more people to witness it. The adoption papers, official and binding, with the seal of the state of Washington and the signatures of a family court judge. And beneath that, another document, the termination of parental rights. My parents, signatures in blue ink, notarized and witnessed, giving up all legal claim to me. Victor picked up the documents with shaking hands. I watched his face go pale as he read, his eyes scanning the pages faster and faster, looking for some loophole, some error, something he could use. He found nothing. "This is..." he started, then stopped. He looked at my parents, and I saw the moment he realized they'd lied to him. They hadn't told him about the termination of rights. They'd presented themselves as grieving family members being unfairly cut out of a will, not as parents who'd legally abandoned their child 15 years ago. "Mr. Crane," Margaret said coolly, "would you like to review those documents more carefully before we proceed? Take your time." He did. The silence in the room was thick and uncomfortable as Victor read every word, checked every signature, examined every seal. The charity representatives were watching with wide eyes, clearly not having expected this level of drama. Harold's cousins were whispering to each other, and Tiffany sat perfectly still, staring at her hands folded in her lap. Finally, Victor set down the papers. "These documents appear to be in order," he said quietly. "Appear to be?" Sandra's voice was shrill. "What does that mean? Victor, you told me we had a case. You told me we could contest this." "Mrs. Matthews, I told you that family members typically have standing to contest a will. However, these documents clearly show that you voluntarily terminated your parental rights to Diana in 2010. In the eyes of the law, you are not her parents. You have no legal standing as family members to contest this will." "But we didn't know. We didn't know he was going to adopt her. We thought..." "What you thought is irrelevant," Margaret interrupted. "The termination document you signed was clear and unambiguous. You gave up all parental rights, including any future claims to inheritance or family standing. Harold's subsequent adoption of Diana was legal and binding. She is his daughter. You are not his family. The estate goes to her." My mother turned to look at me. Her eyes were filled with so much rage it was almost frightening. "You did this. You manipulated him. You isolated him from his real family and made yourself the sole beneficiary. You're nothing but a gold digger who..." "Careful, Mrs. Matthews." My voice was cold, controlled. I'd learned from Harold how to stay calm when people were losing their minds around you. You're in a room full of lawyers, and what you're saying is starting to sound an awful lot like slander. It's not slander if it's true. Then prove it. I leaned forward slightly. Show me evidence that I manipulated Harold. Show me evidence that I isolated him. Show me one single thing that demonstrates I was anything other than a daughter who loved her father and helped build his business into something successful. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had nothing, because there was nothing. Margaret cleared her throat. If we could return to the reading, there are several additional clauses that I believe the room should hear. She turned the page of the will. Section 8. Specific exclusions and explanations. Harold was very particular about including explanations for certain decisions, as he wanted there to be no ambiguity about his intentions. Oh no, I'd read this section. I knew what was coming. And it was going to be brutal. Subsection A. Margaret read, her voice carefully neutral. Regarding my brother-in-law, Richard Matthews. I leave nothing to Richard Matthews, not out of malice, but because of a pattern of behavior that demonstrates a fundamental lack of integrity and responsibility. My father's face had gone white. People were staring at him now. Margaret continued. In 2002, Richard borrowed $45,000 from me to invest in what he called an sure thing, a real estate development that he guaranteed would double our money within 2 years. The development failed. The money was lost. Richard promised to repay me within 5 years. As of this writing, 23 years later, he has repaid exactly $0.00. When I have broached the subject, he has made excuses, changed the subject, or avoided me entirely. The room was dead silent now. One of Harold's cousins was staring at my father with undisguised contempt. Furthermore, Margaret read, in August of 2010, Richard and his wife Sandra made the decision to evict their 13-year-old daughter from their home because she accepted a scholarship to a private school that would have cost them $2,000 per year in fees. Rather than support their child's education, they chose to make her homeless, calling me at 10 o'clock at night to inform me that Diana was sitting on their porch with her belongings in garbage bags and that she was my problem now. I saw Tiffany flinch. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face. I do not leave money to people who fail to honor their debts, and I do not leave money to people who abandon their children. Richard Matthews has demonstrated both of these failures. He receives nothing from my estate. My father was staring at the table, his hands trembling. For once, he had nothing to say. Subsection B, Margaret continued, and I could hear the edge in her voice now. She was enjoying this, I realized. Margaret had loved Harold like a brother, and she was relishing the opportunity to carry out his final revenge. Regarding Sandra Matthews. My mother's head snapped up. I leave nothing to Sandra Matthews. Sandra has, throughout her adult life, demonstrated a consistent pattern of narcissistic behavior, manipulation, and emotional abuse. She has prioritized appearances over substance, personal ambition over family welfare, and her own desires over the needs of her children. "This is defamation!" Sandra shrieked. This is a private will reading, Mrs. Matthews, and statements made in a will regarding the reasons for exclusion are protected speech. You have no grounds for a defamation claim. Please be quiet." Margaret's voice was ice. She continued reading. Sandra made the decision to evict her daughter Diana from the family home when Diana was 13 years old, not because Diana had done anything wrong, but because Diana had the audacity to accept a scholarship that would have required a modest financial contribution from her parents. This contribution was less than what Sandra spent monthly on her other daughter's acting classes, less than what she spent on her own clothing and accessories, and a fraction of what she spent on the family's annual vacation. I watched my mother's face cycle through emotions: rage, humiliation, denial, more rage. Sandra claimed at the time that she was teaching Diana a lesson about respect. In reality, she was punishing a child for daring to prioritize her own future over Sandra's convenience. She was demonstrating in the clearest possible terms that her love was conditional, transactional, and ultimately worthless. "Stop," my mother whispered. "Please stop." Margaret didn't stop. In the 15 years since Diana came to live with me, Sandra has made no effort to maintain a relationship with her daughter. She did not call on Diana's birthdays. She did not attend Diana's high school graduation, her college graduation, or her graduation from business school. She did not visit when Diana won the Foster School of Business Outstanding Graduate Student Award. She did not call when Diana was promoted to CEO of Chen Imports. She made no contact whatsoever until she learned of my terminal diagnosis, at which point she suddenly remembered she had a daughter and began making inquiries about my estate. The charity representatives were looking at my mother with barely disguised disgust. Even Victor Crane had scooted his chair slightly away from her, as if proximity might contaminate him. "Sandra Matthews is not a mother," Margaret read, and Harold's words through her voice felt like hammer blows. "She is a narcissist who views her children as extensions of herself, as props in the performance of her ideal life. Diana was cast aside when she no longer served that performance. Sandra receives nothing from my estate because she has earned nothing, contributed nothing, and sacrificed nothing. She is owed nothing." My mother was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and humiliation, of a person who'd been publicly exposed for exactly what they were. "Subsection C," Margaret said, and her voice softened slightly, "regarding Tiffany Matthews." My sister's head came up. Her face was blotchy from crying. Her mascara smudged. I leave a trust fund of $50,000 to Tiffany Matthews, to be administered by Margaret Chen as trustee, with funds to be released for educational purposes, medical expenses, or other legitimate needs at the trustee's discretion. Tiffany's eyes widened. She clearly hadn't expected anything. I do this not because Tiffany has earned it, but because I believe she was as much a victim of her parents' dysfunction as Diana was. Tiffany was placed on a pedestal she never asked to be on, given responsibilities she was too young to bear, and taught that her worth was measured entirely by her achievements and appearance. This is its own form of abuse, more subtle than what Diana endured, but no less damaging. Tiffany was openly sobbing now. I hope that this money will give Tiffany the opportunity to step off the pedestal, to discover who she is beyond her parents' expectations, and perhaps to rebuild a relationship with her sister if both parties are willing. But this money is not for Sandra or Richard. It is for Tiffany alone, and Margaret has been instructed to ensure that none of it reaches her parents' hands. Margaret paused, giving Tiffany a moment to compose herself. Then she continued. As Section 9, Conditions and Stipulations, this will has been structured to be as legally bulletproof as possible. In anticipation of potential challenges, I include the following provisions. This was the part I'd helped Harold write, the part where we'd anticipated every possible attack and preemptively shut it down. First, any person who contests this will in court forfeits any and all bequests they might otherwise receive. This includes the trust fund for Tiffany Matthews. If her parents pressure her to contest, she loses everything. I saw Victor lean over and whisper urgently to my parents. They'd just been warned. If they pursued this, Tiffany would pay the price. Second, I have been evaluated by 3 independent physicians, including 2 psychiatrists, who have all certified in writing that I am of sound mind and not subject to undue influence. These evaluations were conducted within the past 6 months. Their reports are attached to this will as Exhibits A, B, and C. Margaret pulled out 3 thick reports, each stamped and signed by different doctors. The undue influence argument that my parents' lawyer had probably been planning to use had just been demolished. Third, I have made video testimony, recorded in the presence of Margaret Chen and 2 witnesses, in which I explain my decisions regarding this will in my own words. This video is available for review by the court should any challenge be mounted. In it, I make clear that these are my decisions, made freely and without coercion, and that I am fully aware of the consequences. A video. Harold had recorded a video. I hadn't known about that. Margaret met my eyes across the table and gave me a small nod. She'd have a copy for me when this was over. Fourth, I have allocated $200,000 from the estate to defend against any frivolous challenges to this will. Margaret Chen is authorized to use these funds to pursue legal action against anyone who contests this will in bad faith, including countersuits for legal fees and costs. Victor Crane's face had gone from pale to gray. He was doing the math in his head. Even if he took this case on contingency, he'd be up against a war chest of $200,000 and a lawyer who'd been preparing for this fight for years. He'd lose power, and he'd probably get sanctioned for bringing a frivolous suit. Fifth and finally, any assets that would have gone to a beneficiary who is disqualified for any reason will instead go to the Asian Art Museum of Seattle and the Seattle Public Library, institutions that Harold valued and that will use the resources to benefit the broader community rather than enabling the dysfunction of specific individuals. Margaret set down the will. That concludes the substantive provisions. Are there any questions? Silence. Total, complete silence. Then my father spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. We didn't know. We didn't know he felt this way. We didn't know he was keeping track of all of this. That's because you never asked, I said quietly. You never called him. You never visited. The only time you reached out was when you needed money. Did you really think he didn't notice? We thought family was family. That blood meant something. Blood means nothing, I said. Love means something. Showing up means something. Blood is just biology. Harold taught me that. My mother finally spoke, and her voice was cold, controlled again. The mask was back in place. So that's it then. You get everything? $12 million, the business, all of it, and we get nothing except public humiliation. You got what you earned, I said, which is nothing. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I opened my own folder, the one I'd brought with me. Inside was a document I'd prepared with my own lawyer the week before. A document I'd hoped I wouldn't need to use, but had known I probably would. This is a formal settlement offer. I will give you $50,000, paid in a lump sum, in exchange for a signed agreement that you will not contest the will, that you will not pursue any further legal action against the estate or against me personally, and that you will not make any public statements disparaging Harold's memory or my character. I slid the document across the table. $50,000 for going away and staying away. It's more than you deserve, but I'm offering it anyway because I want this to be over. I want to be done with you. My mother stared at the document. I could see the wheels turning in her head. $50,000 was a lot of money to them, enough to pay off some debt, take a vacation, buy some time. But it was nothing compared to $12 million. And if we don't accept, she asked, then you get nothing. You pursue this in court, you lose, and you walk away with nothing except a mountain of legal debt and a public record of exactly why Harold excluded you from his will. Everything we just heard, the unpaid loan, the abandoned child, the narcissistic abuse, all of it becomes part of the public court record. Every journalist in Seattle will have access to it. Is that really how you want to be remembered? Victor was nodding frantically, mouthing, "Take it at my parents?" My father reached for a pen. "Where do we sign?" "Richard!" My mother grabbed his hand. "You can't be serious. $50,000? That's nothing. That's an insult." "Sandra, we have no case. You heard the lawyer. We signed away our rights. We have no standing. If we fight this, we lose everything, including whatever Tiffany might get." But no. For the first time in my memory, my father stood up to her. "No, Sandra, we are not doing this. We are not dragging our family through a public trial so that everyone can hear what terrible parents we were. We are taking the money and we are leaving." He signed the document. After a long moment, her hand shaking with rage, Sandra signed too. Margaret witnessed the signatures and made copies. Just like that, it was done. My parents had sold their last connection to me for $50,000. "You'll receive the funds within 72 hours, I said, my voice flat and businesslike. "After that, you are not to contact me, not to come to my home or my place of business, not to discuss me in public. If you violate this agreement, I will pursue legal action, and you will be required to return the money plus damages. Do you understand?" "We understand," my father said quietly. Sandra said nothing. She grabbed her purse and walked out, her heels clicking on the marble floor. My father followed. Victor gathered his papers and scurried after them, looking like he couldn't leave fast enough. The charity representatives quietly excused themselves. Harold's cousins left with murmured condolences and promises to stay in touch that we both knew they wouldn't keep. And then it was just me, Margaret, and Tiffany. My sister was still sitting at the table, her hands clasped in front of her, staring at nothing. "Tiffany," I said gently. "Are you okay?" She looked up at me, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "I'm so sorry, Diana. I'm so sorry. For everything. For not standing up for you, for not calling, for being part of the problem." "Tiffany, no, let me finish. Please." She took a shaky breath. "I knew what they were doing to you was wrong. Even when I was 16, I knew. But I was scared. I was scared that if I defended you, they'd turn on me. That I'd lose everything too. So I stayed quiet. I let them kick you out. And I stayed quiet because I was a coward." She wiped her eyes. "And then years passed. And I didn't know how to reach out. I didn't know what to say. Sorry my parents destroyed your childhood. Felt inadequate, so I just didn't. And that makes me just as bad as them." "You were a kid," I said. "You were a kid stuck in a terrible situation. I was old enough to know better. And Diana, I need you to know. Everything Harold said about me in the will, about being on a pedestal, about the pressure. He was right. It destroyed me. I'm 31 years old and I have nothing to show for it. I never made it as an actress. I barely graduated college because I was so burned out from trying to be perfect all the time. I've been in therapy for 3 years trying to undo the damage." She laughed bitterly. "You know the irony? All that money they spent on me, all those classes and workshops and headshots. I haven't acted in 4 years. I work as a receptionist at a dental office. The golden child peaked at 16 and has been falling ever since." I didn't know what to say. I'd spent so many years resenting Tiffany, envying her, thinking her life was perfect. I'd never considered that her cage might have been just as destructive as mine, even if it looked prettier from the outside. "The trust fund Harold left you," Margaret said gently. "It's real. It's yours. And I'll make sure it's used for things that actually help you, not things that your parents want." "Thank you," Tiffany whispered. She looked at me. "Diana, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a relationship, but I want you to know that I am genuinely, deeply sorry. And if you ever want to talk, or get coffee, or just, I don't know, I'd like that. But I understand if you don't." I thought about it. About the girl who'd stood by while I was thrown out. About the sister who'd gotten everything while I got nothing. About the years of resentment and pain. But I also thought about what Harold had taught me. That people could change. That understanding why someone hurt you didn't mean you had to let them keep hurting you, but it might mean you could let go of the anger. "I'd like that too," I said finally. "Not right away. I need time, but maybe coffee in a few months." Tiffany's face broke into the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all day. "I'd like that. Thank you, Diana. Really. Thank you." She left, and then it was just me and Margaret. "Well," Margaret said, leaning back in her chair, "that went about as expected." "You enjoyed that," I accused, but I was smiling. Immensely. Harold and I spent months crafting those explanations. He wanted to make sure everyone knew exactly why they were being excluded, that there was no ambiguity, no room for them to play victim. She paused. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know. It's surreal. It's done. They're gone. They can't come back. They can't contest it. They're just gone." "They're gone," Margaret confirmed. "And Diana, you are now a very wealthy young woman with a successful business and a future limited only by your own ambition. Harold would be so proud." "He already was," I said softly. "He told me. Right before he died, he told me he was proud of me." "Good. That's good." Margaret started gathering her papers. "I have one more thing for you." She pulled out a USB drive. "The video testimony Harold recorded. He wanted you to have it. He recorded it about 2 months before he died. On a good day. He's himself in it. Clear, sharp, funny. It's a good thing to have." I took the drive, clutching it tightly. "Thank you, Margaret, for everything. For helping Harold, for handling this, for being there." "It was my honor," she said. "And Diana, I'm here if you need anything. Legal advice, someone to talk to, whatever. Harold was my friend, and you're his daughter. That makes you family." I hugged her. She hugged me back. And for the first time since Harold died, I felt like maybe I was going to be okay. That night, alone in Harold's house, my house now, I sat in his study and inserted the USB drive into my laptop. My hands were shaking slightly as I clicked on the video file. The screen flickered to life, and there he was, Harold, sitting in this very room, in the leather chair by the window. He looked thin, his face gaunt from the chemotherapy, but his eyes were bright and alert. He was wearing his favorite sweater, the navy blue one with the slight fraying at the cuffs that he'd refused to throw away for 10 years. "Hi, kiddo," he said to the camera, and his voice was strong, clear. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you've just survived what was probably the most uncomfortable will reading in Seattle history." Despite everything, I smiled. "I want you to know something," Harold continued. "Everything that happened today, the exclusions, the explanations, the trust fund for Tiffany, the settlement offer I told Margaret to suggest you make, all of it was carefully planned. Not out of cruelty, but out of love. Love for you, and a desire to protect you from the people who hurt you. He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped. Your parents are going to take that settlement money, Diana. I know them well enough to predict that. Richard doesn't have the spine to fight, and Sandra is ultimately more interested in immediate gratification than long-term victory. $50,000 is enough to soothe her ego while making her go away. And that's what we want. We want them gone. I paused the video, wiping tears from my eyes. Even from beyond the grave, Harold was protecting me. He'd predicted every move, anticipated every reaction. I pressed play again. But here's what I really want to talk about. The business, Chen Imports. Diana, you've built something extraordinary. When I transferred ownership to you last year, the business was worth $8 million. Now it's worth $12 million, and that's during a year when I was dying and you were taking care of me. Imagine what you'll do when you can focus entirely on growth. He smiled, and it reached his eyes. I have some advice, if you'll indulge a dead man. First, expand into Vietnam and Thailand like you've been planning. The market is there, and you have the relationships to make it work. Second, consider opening a third showroom, maybe in San Francisco or Los Angeles. The West Coast luxury market is growing, and you should be positioned to capture it. Third, and most importantly, don't let the business consume you. Make time for yourself, travel, fall in love, make mistakes, live a life that's bigger than quarterly reports and profit margins. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. Diana, you've spent so much of your life proving yourself, proving you were smart enough, good enough, worthy enough. You can stop now. You've proven everything. You're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. You're brilliant, capable, and successful. You don't owe anyone anything anymore. Not me, not your parents, not the world. You're free. The word hung in the air. Free. There's one more thing, Harold said, and now his expression turned serious. I know you, Diana. I know you're going to feel guilty about the money, about inheriting everything, about your parents walking away with only $50,000. You're going to wonder if you should have been more generous, more forgiving, more understanding. He leaned closer to the camera. Don't you dare feel guilty. You earned this, not through manipulation or deceit, but through 15 years of hard work, dedication, and love. You were there for me when I was sick. You ran the business when I couldn't. You were my daughter in every way that matters. This money, this business, this life, it's yours because you earned it. Never forget that. I was crying openly now, tears streaming down my face. I love you, Diana Chen, Harold said. I loved you from the moment I picked you up from that porch 15 years ago. You were this scared, brave little girl who'd chosen her own future over her parents' approval, and I knew then that you were going to be someone extraordinary. I was right. You are extraordinary. And I am so, so proud of you. He smiled one last time. Now go build an empire, kiddo, and be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you, to be happy. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there in the dark study, crying, feeling the weight of Harold's love and expectations and hopes for me settling on my shoulders like a warm blanket. He was right. I was free. Free to build whatever I wanted. Free to become whoever I wanted. Free to live a life that was entirely my own. But first, I had to finish what had started in that conference room. 3 days later, the settlement money was transferred to my parents' account. I received a terse email from my father acknowledging receipt. No thank you, no apology, just confirmation that the transaction was complete and that they understood the terms of the agreement. Fine. I didn't need their gratitude. I didn't want it. What I wanted was to move forward, to take Harold's advice and build something bigger than myself, to honor his memory not by mourning forever, but by living the life he'd wanted me to live. I threw myself into work. I finalized the expansion plans for Vietnam and Thailand, traveling to both countries to meet with potential suppliers and manufacturers. I negotiated a lease on a showroom space in Los Angeles, a beautiful converted warehouse in the Arts District that would be perfect for displaying our larger pieces. I hired 2 new designers and a full-time social media manager to help build our brand presence. Chen Imports grew. In the 6 months after Harold's death, we increased revenue by 40%. We were featured in Architectural Digest and Elle Decor. A celebrity designer used our pieces in a renovation that was covered by HGTV, and suddenly we had clients from across the country requesting custom work. I was successful. I was wealthy. I was everything Harold had believed I could be, but I was also lonely. I'd spent so much of my life focused on survival, on proving myself, on building something that would make Harold proud, that I'd never learned how to just be, to exist without a goal, without a mission, without something to prove. Margaret noticed. She called me into her office 6 months after the will reading, ostensibly to review some estate paperwork, but really to stage an intervention. "Diana," she said, pouring me a cup of tea, "you look exhausted." "I'm fine, just busy. The LA showroom opens next month and—" "You're not fine. You're working 16-hour days, 7 days a week. When was the last time you took a day off?" I thought about it. "I took last Sunday off. I slept until noon." Sleeping until noon and then working from home the rest of the day doesn't count as a day off. She set down the teapot and looked at me directly. "Harold would be proud of what you've built, but he'd also be concerned that you're burning yourself out." "I'm not burning out. I'm building an empire just like he told me to." "He also told you to be happy." "Are you happy, Diana?" The question stopped me cold. Was I happy? I was successful. I was independent. I was financially secure beyond my wildest dreams. But happy? I don't know, I admitted. "Then maybe it's time to find out." Margaret pulled out a brochure. "There's an international trade conference in Tokyo next month. 3 days of networking, workshops, supplier meetings. You've been talking about expanding into Japanese markets. This would be perfect. I can't take 3 days off. The LA opening will be handled by your excellent staff, whom you've trained extremely well. Diana, you need to learn to delegate. More importantly, you need to learn to live. Go to Tokyo, meet people, see the city, do something that's not about the business for once." I looked at the brochure. Tokyo. I'd never been to Japan, despite importing Japanese furniture for years. It seemed ridiculous, actually, that I'd built a business around Asian art and design and had never visited the countries where our pieces came from. "Okay," I said, "I'll go." Margaret smiled. "Good. And Diana? While you're there, try to have fun. That's an order from your lawyer and your friend." Tokyo was overwhelming in the best possible way. The city was a symphony of contradictions. Ancient temples next to gleaming skyscrapers, quiet gardens hidden behind neon-lit streets, tradition and innovation existing in perfect harmony. The conference was useful. I met suppliers, learned about new manufacturing techniques, and made connections that would benefit the business for years. But the real revelation came on the third night, when I skipped the closing reception and instead wandered through the Shibuya district alone. I found myself in a small gallery, barely marked, showcasing contemporary ceramic work by a local artist. The pieces were stunning, modern shapes with traditional glazing techniques, functional objects elevated to art. "Beautiful, aren't they?" a voice said beside me in accented English. I turned to find a man about my age, Japanese, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, studying the same vase I'd been admiring. "They're incredible," I agreed. "The way he's using traditional methods but creating something completely new. It's exactly what I look for in the work I import." "You're an importer." His interest was genuine. "I own Chen Imports. We specialize in Asian furniture and art for the US market." "Ah, I know your company. My cousin sold you a collection of Meiji-era tansu last year. He said you were very fair, very knowledgeable." We talked for an hour, standing in that gallery. His name was Kenji, and he was an architect specializing in sustainable design. He'd studied in the US, worked in Singapore, and returned to Tokyo to start his own firm. He was passionate about preserving traditional Japanese design principles while embracing modern materials and techniques. He was also funny, intelligent, and the first person in months who'd talked to me about something other than business. "Would you like to get dinner?" he asked as the gallery was closing. "There's a small place nearby that serves the best okonomiyaki in Tokyo. Very local, no tourists." I should have said no. I should have gone back to my hotel, reviewed my notes from the conference, planned my next day. That's what the old Diana would have done. Instead, I heard myself say, I'd love to. We had dinner. Then we walked through the streets of Shibuya, talking about architecture and art and the challenge of honoring tradition while creating something new. He showed me a building he'd designed, a small office complex that incorporated traditional Japanese joinery techniques in its facade. I showed him pictures of the LA showroom, and he gave me ideas for how to better integrate natural light. At midnight, standing outside my hotel, he said, I had a wonderful evening. If you're ever back in Tokyo, I'm coming back next month, I heard myself say. To meet with a supplier in Kyoto, I could stop in Tokyo on the way. He smiled. I'd like that. I flew back to Seattle the next morning, my head spinning. What was I doing? I didn't have time for dating. I barely had time to sleep. The LA showroom was opening in 3 weeks. I had a million things to do. But I couldn't stop thinking about that night in Tokyo. About feeling like myself. Not the CEO or the orphan or Harold's daughter. Just Diana. A woman having dinner with an interesting man, talking about things that mattered. When I got back to the office, my assistant handed me a stack of messages. Most were routine. Supplier confirmations, design approvals, meeting requests. But one caught my eye. A message from Tiffany. She'd called 3 times while I was gone. I stared at the pink slip of paper with her number on it. We'd agreed to coffee in a few months. At the will reading. That had been 6 months ago. I'd been so busy building the business that I'd pushed the idea to the back of my mind, telling myself I'd deal with it when things calmed down. Things never calmed down. That was the nature of running a business. There was always another crisis, another opportunity, another reason to delay. But Harold's voice echoed in my head. Make time for yourself. Travel, fall in love, make mistakes. Live a life that's bigger than quarterly reports and profit margins. I picked up the phone and dialed. Tiffany answered on the second ring. Diana. Hi, Tiffany. I got your messages. Sorry I didn't call back sooner. I was in Tokyo for a conference. Tokyo? That's amazing. How was it? We talked for a few minutes about the trip, the conference, the city. It was awkward at first, stilted, 2 people who shared DNA but not much else trying to find common ground. Then Tiffany said, I wanted to call because I've been in therapy, really intensive therapy, and my therapist suggested I reach out, not to ask for anything, she added quickly, just to, I don't know, try. If you're willing? I'm willing, I said. Coffee? I'd like that. Really like that. We made plans to meet the following Saturday at a cafe in Capitol Hill, neutral territory, public enough to feel safe but quiet enough to actually talk. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not hope that Tiffany and I would have some fairy tale reconciliation and become best friends, but hope that maybe, possibly, we could build something new. Something that wasn't defined by our parents, dysfunction, or our shared trauma, but by who we were now, as adults, making our own choices. Saturday came. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, nervous in a way that had nothing to do with business negotiations or supplier meetings. This was personal. This mattered in a different way. Tiffany arrived exactly on time. She looked different than she had at the will reading, healthier, more put together, but also somehow softer, less defensive. We ordered coffee. We sat, and then, for a long moment, neither of us knew what to say. Finally, Tiffany spoke. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a sister to you. We've never been sisters. Not really. I don't know where to start. Maybe we start with the truth, I said. No performing, no pretending, just honesty. Okay, honest truth? She took a breath. I'm jealous of you. I've been jealous of you for 15 years. You got out. You found someone who loved you unconditionally. You built a life that's actually yours. Meanwhile, I stayed, and I let them destroy me. And now at 31, I'm starting from scratch trying to figure out who I am beyond the daughter who was supposed to be famous. I hadn't expected that. You're jealous of me? Tiffany, you were the golden child. You got everything. I got a cage, she said quietly. A beautiful, expensive cage, but still a cage. You got freedom. Yeah, you had to fight for it. Yeah, It was brutal and unfair, but you got out, Diana, and I didn't. We sat with that for a moment. I'm jealous of you too, I admitted. You got to be loved. Even if it was conditional, you got to be the priority. I spent my entire childhood being invisible, and part of me still resents you for that. That's fair, Tiffany said. That's more than fair. But I'm also sorry, I continued. Sorry that I never reached out. I told myself it was because I was busy, because I needed time, because you were part of that toxic system. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared that you'd be like them. Scared that you'd hurt me too. I probably would have, Tiffany said honestly. But if you'd reached out 5 years ago or even 2 years ago, I probably would have hurt you. Because I was still in their world, still playing their game. But I'm trying to be different now. I'm trying to be my own person. How's that going? She laughed, and it was genuine. Terribly. I have no idea who I am. I'm working as a receptionist because it's the first job I've ever had where no one expects me to be special. I'm in therapy twice a week. I'm learning how to have hobbies that aren't about performing or achieving. It's uncomfortable and weird, and sometimes I hate it, but it's mine. That sounds brave, I said. It doesn't feel brave. It feels like I'm failing at everything. Welcome to being human, I said, and I was smiling. It's messy. We talked for 2 hours about our childhoods, about our parents, about what therapy had taught Tiffany, and what running a business had taught me. We didn't solve anything. We didn't have some magical moment of perfect understanding, but it was a start. As we were leaving, Tiffany hesitated. Can we do this again? Maybe in a couple weeks? I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. Over the next few months, Tiffany and I built something fragile but real. We met for coffee every other week. She told me about her therapy breakthroughs and her struggles with our parents, who kept trying to guilt her into giving them money from her trust fund. I told her about the business, about Tokyo, about Kenji, whom I was now emailing regularly and planned to see again when I returned to Japan. We didn't talk about the deep stuff every time. Sometimes we just talked about books or TV shows, or the ridiculous customer who'd tried to haggle over a piece of art worth $50,000. Normal sibling stuff, or what we imagined normal sibling stuff might be. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, times when old patterns resurfaced or when the weight of our shared history felt too heavy. But we were trying. And that was more than we'd ever had before. One day, 4 months after our first coffee, Tiffany called me in tears. She showed up at my apartment. She sobbed. Mom. She showed up and demanded to know why I wasn't giving her money from the trust fund. She said I was being selfish, that I owed them after everything they'd done for me. She said, her voice broke. She said that if I was going to be ungrateful like you, then maybe I should just leave the family too. What did you do? I asked. I told her to leave. I told her that Margaret explained the trust is for me, not for them, and that even if I could give them money, I wouldn't, because they haven't changed. They haven't learned anything. They just want to keep using me the way they always have. How do you feel? Terrified. Relieved. Guilty. All of it. She paused. Diana, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever stop feeling guilty? About choosing yourself over them. I thought about it. About the years I'd spent wondering if I'd done the right thing. About the nights I'd lain awake questioning whether I was selfish, whether I should have tried harder, whether family was supposed to mean sacrifice no matter what. Yes, I said finally. You do. Not all at once. Not completely. But it gets easier. Because you start to realize that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And you're allowed to survive, Tiffany. You're allowed to choose yourself. She was quiet for a moment. Then, thank you. I needed to hear that. Anytime. That's what sisters are for. It was the first time either of us had used that word. Sisters. It hung in the air between us, fragile and new and precious. Yeah, Tiffany said softly. I guess it is. 1 year after Harold's death, I stood in the newly opened Los Angeles showroom and looked around at what we'd built. The space was breathtaking. 20-foot ceilings, natural light flooding through industrial windows, carefully curated pieces displayed like art in a museum. A Ming Dynasty cabinet sat next to a contemporary Japanese screen. A pair of antique Korean tansu flanked a modern sculptural piece commissioned from an artist Kenji had introduced me to in Tokyo. It was exactly what Harold had envisioned. Tradition and innovation, history and future, all existing in harmony. Margaret stood beside me, champagne glass in hand, watching the crowd of designers, collectors, and journalists circulating through the space. The opening had been a massive success. We'd already sold 3 major pieces, and I had a stack of business cards from potential clients who wanted custom work. "He'd be so proud," Margaret said quietly. "I know," I said. And I did know. I could feel it, almost like Harold was there with me, seeing what his little import business had become. My phone buzzed, a text from Kenji, who was visiting from Tokyo for the opening. "The sushi place around the corner in 30 minutes. I have something to ask you." I smiled and texted back a confirmation. "That's the architect, isn't it?" Margaret asked, her eyes twinkling. "The one you've been flying to Japan to see every month?" "We've been keeping it casual," I said, but I couldn't keep the smile off my face. Casual. Is that why he flew all the way from Tokyo for your showroom opening? He had business in LA anyway." "Sure he did." Margaret squeezed my arm. "Diana, I'm happy for you. Really happy. You deserve this. All of it. The success, the love, the life you're building. You've earned every bit of it." The sushi restaurant was small and intimate, the kind of place that didn't take reservations but somehow always had a table for regulars. Kenji was already there when I arrived, sitting at the bar, 2 seats saved. "You look beautiful," he said, standing to greet me. "The opening was incredible. You should be very proud." "Thank you. And thank you for coming. I know it's a long flight." "Worth it," he said simply. We ordered, we ate, we talked about the opening and his latest project in Tokyo and the supplier meeting I had scheduled in Kyoto next month. It was easy, comfortable, the way it had been since that first night in Shibuya a year ago. Then, as we were finishing our meal, Kenji set down his chopsticks and looked at me seriously. "Diana, I need to tell you something. I've been offered a position, head of sustainable design for a major firm. It's a huge opportunity, everything I've been working toward." My heart sank. "That's amazing, Kenji. Congratulations." "The firm is in Seattle." I looked up sharply. "Seattle? They're opening a new office, focusing on eco-friendly commercial buildings. They want me to lead the division." I told them I'd think about it. "But honestly, Diana, the only thing I'm thinking about is whether you want me to be in the same city as you." "Do I stopped, processing. "Kenji, are you asking me if I want you to move to Seattle?" "I'm asking if you want to take this relationship seriously. If you want to stop flying back and forth across the Pacific and actually build something together. I'm asking if you're ready for that." I thought about the past year. About the months of emails and video calls and stolen weekends in Tokyo and Seattle. About how easy it was to talk to him, how he made me laugh, how he understood my ambition because he had his own. About how he'd never once made me feel like I had to choose between him and my work, because he respected both. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I want that. I'm ready for that." He smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "Good, because I already accepted the position. I start in 6 weeks." I laughed and hit his arm. "You already accepted? What if I'd said no?" Then I would have had a very awkward conversation with my new employer. "But I didn't think you'd say no. Was I wrong?" "No," I said, and I was smiling so hard my face hurt. "You weren't wrong." 6 weeks later, I helped Kenji move into his new apartment in Capitol Hill. It was a modern loft with huge windows and exposed brick, the kind of place that felt like him, clean lines with character, contemporary but with history. "I can't believe you're actually here," I said, watching him unpack boxes of books and architectural models. "I can't believe it either. Seattle is so different from Tokyo, quieter, greener." "You'll love it. I'll show you all the best places. Pike Place, the waterfront, the hiking trails. Oh, and Margaret is dying to meet you properly. She's been interrogating me about you for months." Your lawyer friend? The one who executed Harold's will? That's the one. She's kind of become family, actually. Her and Tiffany. It's weird, having family again. Good weird, but weird. Kenji stopped unpacking and came over to where I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by bubble wrap. How is Tiffany doing? Better. She got a new job, actually. Working for a nonprofit that helps young women in the arts navigate career transitions. It's perfect for her. She gets to use her experience in theater and performing, but she's helping others instead of trying to be a star herself. That's wonderful. And your parents? Haven't heard from them since the settlement. They cashed the check, signed the agreement, and disappeared, which is exactly what I wanted. I paused. Actually, that's not entirely true. My mother tried to contact Tiffany a few more times, but Tiffany blocked her number. She's done. We're both done. Good, Kenji said firmly. You both deserve to be done. He sat down next to me, taking my hand. Diana, can I ask you something? Something serious? Of course. What do you want? Not for the business, not for anyone else. Just for you. What do you want your life to look like 5 years from now? I thought about it. A year ago, I would have said, a successful business, financial security, independence, all the things I'd fought so hard to achieve. But now, I want balance, I said slowly. I want the business to keep growing, but I don't want it to consume me. I want to travel more, not just for work, but for pleasure. I want to spend time with the people I love. I want to wake up on Sundays and not immediately check my email. I want to build a life, not just a career. That sounds perfect, Kenji said. Can I be part of that life? You already are, I said. He kissed me, and it felt like coming home. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, I stood in front of a new building in downtown Seattle. The sign above the door read, Chen Arts Foundation, in elegant lettering, English and Chinese characters side by side. This was the final piece of Harold's legacy, and mine. A nonprofit foundation dedicated to supporting young artists and entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. We'd provide scholarships, mentorship, studio space, and business training. Everything I'd wished I'd had when I was 13 years old, standing on that porch with my life in garbage bags. Margaret stood beside me for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Tiffany was there too, now serving on the foundation's board. Kenji had designed the interior space, creating a beautiful blend of traditional and modern that would have made Harold smile. And in the front row of the small crowd gathered for the opening, I saw Mrs. Patterson, my 8th grade math teacher, the woman who'd first told me I had potential. I'd tracked her down through the school district, called her out of the blue, and invited her to the opening. She'd cried on the phone when I'd told her what the foundation would do. Are you ready? Margaret asked, handing me the scissors for the ribbon. Almost. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery. There was a picture of Harold from 5 years ago, standing in front of the original Chen Imports showroom, grinning at the camera. I'd taken it on a whim one Saturday afternoon when we'd been rearranging displays. I held up the phone so his face was visible in my selfie camera, positioning it so it looked like he was standing next to me. Then I took the picture, me, Mao, the new foundation building, and Harold's image on the screen, all together. Okay, I said, putting the phone away. Now I'm ready. I cut the ribbon. People applauded, cameras flashed, and I felt, for the first time in my life, completely at peace. That evening, back at my house, Harold's house, which I still thought of as partly his, I sat in the study where I'd watched his video testimony a year ago. Kenji was in the kitchen, experimenting with a recipe he'd learned from his grandmother. I could hear him humming, the sound of running water, the occasional clatter of pots and pans, domestic sounds, happy sounds. I opened my laptop and started typing an email to the foundation's first scholarship recipients. 20 students, aged 13 to 18, all of them brilliant and talented and deserving. All of them from circumstances that had tried to hold them back. Dear scholars, I wrote, welcome to the Chen Arts Foundation. You are here because someone saw your potential, because you've worked hard, and because you deserve a chance to build the future you dream of. I want to tell you something that someone once told me. You don't owe anyone your dreams. Not your parents, not your teachers, not society's expectations. Your dreams are yours. Protect them. Fight for them. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you're not worth investing in. The path ahead won't always be easy. There will be people who doubt you, who try to hold you back, who tell you that you're too young, too inexperienced, too different. Prove them wrong. Not out of spite, but out of love. Love for yourself, for your dreams, for the life you want to build. This foundation exists because someone once took a chance on me when no one else would. Because someone saw past my circumstances and invested in my potential. Because someone taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up for you, who believes in you, who chooses to stay when things get hard. I hope this foundation can be that for you, a place that shows up, a place that believes, a place that stays. Welcome to the family. I signed it, attached the welcome packet and scholarship details, and hit send. Kenji appeared in the doorway. Dinner's ready. I made curry. It might be terrible. I'm sure it's perfect, I said, standing up and closing my laptop. He took my hand as we walked to the kitchen. You seem happy. I am happy, I said, and realized it was completely true. For the first time in my life, I'm actually happy. We ate dinner at the kitchen table where Harold and I had shared 1,000 meals. We talked about our days, about the foundation, about the weekend trip to Portland we were planning, normal things, happy things. After dinner, as Kenji was washing dishes and I was drying, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Diana? It's your father. I froze. Kenji looked over, concerned, but I waved him off. What do you want, Richard? He paused. I saw the article about the foundation. In the Seattle Times, they mentioned you, mentioned Harold, mentioned how you'd built Chen Imports into what it is. Okay. I wanted to call and say, I'm proud of you. I know I don't have the right. I know I gave up that right 15 years ago. But I wanted you to know. I was quiet for a long moment. A year ago, I might have hung up. 6 months ago, I might have yelled. But now, I just felt tired. And also, strangely, free. Thank you for calling, I said. But I need you to understand something. I didn't build this to make you proud. I didn't do any of this for you, or because of you. I did it for me, and for Harold, and for every kid who's ever been told they're not worth investing in. I know that, Diana. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I'm not calling to try to be part of your life. I wanted you to know that I see what you've become, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I wasn't strong enough to choose you when it mattered. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it. But I'm going to hang up now, and I'm going to ask you not to call again. Not out of anger, but because I've built a life that works for me, and you're not part of it. You chose that 15 years ago, and I'm choosing it now. Do you understand? I understand, he said quietly. Goodbye, Diana. Goodbye, Richard. I hung up. Kenji was watching me carefully. Are you okay? Yeah, I said, and I was surprised to find it was true. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm free. Free? Free from needing their approval. Free from wondering if I should have tried harder, done more, been different. Free from carrying their choices like they're my fault. They made their decision, I made mine, and I'm happy with mine. Kenji put down the dish he was washing and pulled me into a hug. I'm proud of you. Not for what you've built, though that's incredible, but for choosing yourself. For being brave enough to walk away from people who hurt you and build something better. Harold taught me that, I said. He taught me that you're allowed to choose yourself, that it's not selfish, it's survival. He sounds like he was an amazing man. He was. He really was. 2 years after Harold's death, I stood in the boardroom of Chen Imports, now officially Chen Arts and Imports, reflecting our expanded mission, and looked at the assembled team. We'd grown to 15 employees. We had showrooms in Seattle, Los Angeles, and Portland. We'd just signed a major contract with a hotel chain for custom furniture in 12 locations. Revenue had tripled since Harold's passing. But more importantly, the foundation had awarded scholarships to over 100 students. 3 of them were now working for Chen Imports as designers and apprentices. 2 had started their own businesses with our mentorship. 1 had just been accepted to Yale's architecture program. "I have an announcement," I said to the team. "I'm promoting Elena to Chief Operating Officer." Elena, who'd been with us for 3 years and had proven herself brilliant and dedicated, looked shocked. "Diana, thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't. You've earned this." I took a breath. "I'm making this change because I'm stepping back slightly from day-to-day operations. I'll still be CEO, still be involved in major decisions, but I'm delegating more. Because I've realized that for this business to truly thrive, it can't be dependent on just me. We need to be a team, not a one-woman show." I looked around the room at the people I'd hired, trained, trusted. Harold built this company from nothing. I've helped it grow, but the future belongs to all of us, and I want to make sure we're building something that can outlast any one person. After the meeting, Margaret called. "I heard about the promotion. Good move." "Thanks. It feels right. Scary, but right. That's usually how the best decisions feel." She paused. "Diana, I have something to tell you. I'm retiring." My heart sank. "Margaret, no, I need you. The foundation needs you." "You don't need me. You have an excellent board, including your sister, who's doing fantastic work. You have good lawyers on staff. You have everything under control. And I'm 68 years old. It's time for me to travel, spend time with my grandchildren, maybe write that book I've been threatening to write for 20 years. But who will I call when I need advice? Who will tell me when I'm being an idiot?" She laughed. "Your boyfriend, probably, or your sister, or Elena, Diana. You have people now. You're not alone anymore. That's the whole point." She was right. I did have people. I had Kenji, who'd moved in with me 6 months ago. I had Tiffany, who I had lunch with every week. I had my team at work, my board at the foundation, my network of suppliers and designers and friends I'd made over the years. I wasn't alone. I'd built a family, chosen piece by piece, person by person. "Okay," I said, "but you're staying on the foundation board, non-negotiable." "Deal," Margaret said. "Now go live your life, Diana. You've earned it." On the 3rd anniversary of Harold's death, I visited his grave for the first time since the funeral. I'd avoided it before. It felt too raw, too final. But now, standing there with flowers in my hand, it felt right. The headstone was simple, elegant. Harold Chen, it read, "Beloved friend, mentor, father." And below that, a quote I'd chosen, "Family is who shows up." I knelt down and placed the flowers, blue irises, his favorite, at the base of the stone. "Hi, Harold," I said quietly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to visit. I don't know, scared, maybe, or just not ready. I wanted to tell you that I took your advice, all of it. I expanded the business. We're in 3 cities now with a 4th planned for next year. I fell in love. His name is Kenji, and he's an architect, and I think you would have liked him. He's kind and brilliant, and he challenges me in all the right ways." I reconnected with Tiffany. That's been complicated, but good. We're not best friends, probably never will be, but we're sisters, real sisters, finally. And I started the foundation. We've helped over 100 kids so far, kids like me, who just needed someone to believe in them. I'm happy at Harold. Really, genuinely happy. Not just successful or secure or independent, actually happy. And that's because of you. Because you showed me what love looks like. Real, unconditional love that doesn't ask for anything in return, except that I be myself and be happy. I miss you every day. But I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm living the life you wanted me to live. And I hope, wherever you are, you're proud. I stood up, wiping tears from my eyes. As I turned to leave, I saw Tiffany standing a few feet away, holding her own bouquet of flowers. "I didn't know you were coming today," I said. "I didn't know you were either. I wanted to thank him. For the trust fund. For seeing me when no one else did. for giving me a chance to figure out who I am. We stood there together, two sisters who'd been broken by the same family and saved by the same man. "Want to get lunch after this?" Tiffany asked. "There's this new place in Fremont I've been wanting to try." "I'd like that," I said. We placed our flowers together, said our private goodbyes to Harold, and walked back to our cars together. As we were leaving the cemetery, Tiffany said, "Diana, thank you." "For what?" "For giving me another chance, for not writing me off, for showing me that it's possible to break free from them and build something better." "Thank you for being brave enough to try," I said. "I know it's not easy." "None of it's easy," Tiffany said, "but it's worth it. Building a real relationship with you, it's worth all the hard work." We hugged in the parking lot, and it felt real, not performative, not obligatory, but genuine. "See you next week?" Tiffany asked. "See you next week," I confirmed. That night, Kenji and I sat on the deck of our house. We'd started calling it our house instead of Harold's or Diana's, watching the sunset over Puget Sound. He was sketching designs for a new project. I was reviewing scholarship applications for the Foundation's next cohort. "Look at this one," I said, handing him an application. 14 years old, brilliant writer, living in foster care. She reminds me of me at that age. Kenji read it and smiled. "She's definitely getting a scholarship. All of them are getting scholarships. I can't choose just 20 this year. I'm expanding it to 30. "Of course you are." He put down his sketchbook and pulled me close. "You know what Harold would say if he could see you now." "What?" "I told you so." Kenji smiled. "He knew you'd be extraordinary. He knew you'd build an empire. He knew you'd be happy. He was a smart man. He was, and so are you." Kenji kissed the top of my head. "I'm proud of you, Diana Chen. Not for what you've achieved, though that's incredible, but for who you've become, for choosing healing over bitterness, connection over isolation, love over fear." "I learned from the best," I said. We sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. And I thought about the girl I'd been 15 years ago, sitting on a porch with her life in garbage bags, terrified and alone. That girl had survived. She'd fought. She'd built something beautiful from the ashes of her childhood. And now she was free. Free to build, free to love, free to choose, free to be happy. That was Harold's gift to me. Not the money, not the business, not even the unconditional love, though all of those mattered. His gift was teaching me that I deserved to be free. And I was going to spend the rest of my life honoring that gift.